Hi there! In this section, we're going to be making the actual journal you'll be using for your daily journal or monthly journal, depending on what you want to call it. And so I grabbed a 12 by 12 paper pad. This one happens to be Tales of You and Me, and it is by Prima, but any 12 by 12 pad will work. What we're going to be doing is cutting things down, and so having this paper pad already at 12 by 12, it makes it a lot easier. What I've chosen is these papers are great. A lot of these 12 by 12 paper pads, whether it's Tim Holtz, Prima, any of those other paper pads, usually come with a set of different decorative pieces as well. So I pulled these out, and we're going to use those in a little bit. And then I chose this for my piece that I'm going to use to make my cover. So let me set this aside for right now. And the first thing we need to do is I'm going to grab my paper cutter. I find it much easier to do this. However, if you don't have a paper cutter, use rulers. Try to use a T-square if you can find one, but make sure your lines are straight, in other words. So if you're going to use a ruler, you want to measure multiple times from one side or this way to make sure you're measuring this out. For this journal, I am going to be making it 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches, which I believe is 27 centimeters each way. In the papers that I'm going to use, you'll get a printout, and it talks about the different sizes that you'll need, and it'll be in inches and centimeters. I will do all those conversions for you. But throughout my teaching, we're going to go with 8.5 by 8.5. And as you saw previously, if you're using A4, you're going to use 8 1/4 by 8.5 size papers. So it'll be 8 1/4 this way and 8 1/2 this way, because A4 papers only come 8 1/4 tall. And also, a typical traveler's notebook is 8 1/4 tall by 8 1/2. However, all my papers are 8 1/2 by 8 1/2 because I'm lazy and I don't feel like cutting that extra 1/4 inch off the top. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut. I want to use this part, so I'm going to flip it over and we're going to cut it off at the 8 1/2 mark. And then I always double check. Double check. My husband, who's a carpenter, he says double check, triple check, quadruple check, and then cut. Measure twice, cut once. That's the old saying. So that is 8 1/2. We're going to cut this way and set that aside. And then I want it to be 8 1/2 inches tall this way as well. And kind of what I like is this is just really simple. You don't have to math at all. And that's all we're going to do. So we now have our 8 1/2 by 8 1/2 piece of cardstock. There we go. Couldn't remember what it was called. So next we want to mark the middle. Now you could just fold it in half, or you could, just do that. That would be fine. However, I am going to score it. And when you're scoring, you want to score on the wrong side from where you're going to fold. Does that make sense? So we're going to fold this in half this way. So we're going to score on this side. If you don't have a scoreboard, you could always also use a thick book and use that with a ruler. There's a variety of different things that you could do if you don't have a scoreboard. And then one of the things I love about this scoreboard is because I can just store my bone folder in there. So this is fairly simple. We're simply going to take this now, fold it in half. Actually, I'm going to pull that a little bit. For whatever reason, this scoreboard, when I score things, it's not so much that it's off, it's just the way it wants to score. So anyway, so there's our cover. We could leave this cover plain, or we could decorate it. I was actually thinking about decorating it, which is why I grabbed some of these papers. And this is a great time to decorate because it's easier to decorate it if you lay it out flat like this. On the other hand, maybe we'll just keep it really simple because this is just gorgeous the way it is. So I think we'll hold off on doing any decorating on this, at least at this point. I think that would be a whole nother class. We're just trying to make something very, very simple. So I'm going to set this aside. And we're going to talk about papers now. So a couple of decisions you need to make. First of all, are you the type person who journals every day but only uses one side of the paper? So let me grab one of my bigger journals. Hang on. So this is a journal that I got from someone else, and I love it, I love it, I love it. So what I did when I first started out journaling, I journaled every day, and so each day was a different page, but then I went to 2-page journaling in here. Now when I journal, I only journal 1 page at a time. Let me grab one of my other journals, hang on. So what you'll see is this is an older journal of mine, and I journal every day. So like that was May 12th and that is May 13th. So you need to decide, your first decision needs to be, am I going to use 2 pieces of paper or both sides per day, or am I only going to use 1? And that's going to make a big difference in how many pages you're going to use. You also need to decide, do you want extra, more junk journaly kind of pages, or do you want all just plain paper? So some of your options are going to be coffee dyed paper. I love coffee dyed paper, and I will actually give you the link to how I do coffee dyed paper and talking about acid neutral coffee dyed paper. There are a lot of people out there who say it doesn't matter. Personally, I prefer to have my coffee dyed paper acid neutral. I just feel safer that way. And this is 28-pound coffee dyed paper, but you could use 20-pound, it doesn't matter. I've even seen people use really heavy paper. Some of the other papers you can use, if you want, just get plain white. This is just plain white copy paper. That's totally fine. You could print lines on your paper. Let's see, here's some other ones. You can use other dyed papers. This is my avocado dyed paper, and it's gorgeous. That's another option. You can use ledger paper, and for me, I always copy dye all my ledger paper. You could also use what's called grid paper, if you like grids, especially if you're doing more of a planner. A lot of people prefer grids. Let's see. Oh, this is one of my favorites. This is tracing paper, and I have 2 different weights. This is a really lightweight tracing paper. This is a higher quality that actually has more of a glassine feel to it because there's a film on it. So that's another one. You could use, this is called mulberry paper. I love using mulberry paper because it comes in all these gorgeous colors. And it's very, with all the colors, but it's very natural looking. You can add doilies. A lot of people like doilies. This is some actual paper that I got that goes in a planner, and it comes already that way. You could use dictionary papers if you, so I'm getting kind of into some of the extra papers if you want. You can take, what are these, receipts, coffee dyed receipts. You can use, I love to use a lot of old vintage papers, so like there's some old vintage ledger, old French music, old French receipts, just old calligraphy papers. I get all of these from Monahan's Papers, so I'll give you that link as well. So as you can see, basically if it's paper, you can use it, and I've even seen some people put fabric in their books, so you could put fabric in it. So what I have picked out is because I only write on one page, I'm going to do 8 blank papers and 4 decorative papers. If you are going to do 2 pages per day, you will need to double that and make it 16 blank pages. And then you still might want to use 4 to 6 to 8 decorative pages in there as well. That's going to leave you with a really, really, really chunky journal. I find that once I get over about 16 pages, 20 is kind of the max, and that's going to give you a really, really chunky journal that may or may not fit in your book cover, so you may have to adjust that. So what I have here, my extra pages are an Edith Holden page, and one of the things I love about Edith Holden pages is you can actually, believe it or not, Edith Holden, you can get that book either as a paperback or a hardback. The hardbacks are bigger pages, the paperbacks are smaller. I picked an old piece of ephemera, an old piece of French paper, and then I love the sound of tracing paper, so I added a piece of tracing paper. One of the other things I love to do is to have flips. So what I've done here is simply taken an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and I've scored it twice to have these flips. Then these are just more of the 8.5 by 8.5 pieces of paper. So what I'm going to do real quickly is just show you. I'm going to cut one of these down, and I'm going to then add a flip to the other one. So I'm grabbing my scoreboard again. So when I'm scoring this, I'm making sure I'm in frame here. I'm going to come out to the 4.5 mark, or 4.25, because that's half of 8.5, 4.25 mark. And then I'm also going to go out here to the 8.5 line and fold that there. So now when I fold these in, they're in the right place. Or you didn't, maybe you didn't want to score that other piece, you would have been fine there. Now, to get everything to fit and to lay flat, you want to go back over it and make sure that you have flattened out your paper as well as you can. So next, I'm going to take this piece of paper and cut it down, just grabbing my cutter. And like I said, I love having a cutter. It just makes things go much quicker. I'm going to cut off the boring side. So again, I'm looking for this to be 8.5. Double checking that. And we're going to cut this piece off. Now don't throw these away, because these are great pieces of paper that you can use to do all kinds of things. You can even make these into tall tags. So I love having them for that. So if you're a true junk journaler, you're not going to throw a lot of stuff out. So all I'm doing now that I have this cut off, remember I showed you that I actually took that other one and it, drawing a blank here. And I scored it. This one I didn't score. And if you don't have something, just take your thumbnail and run it along there. So now I have all of my papers, and all we're simply going to do is start putting these together. And what I like to do is I make sure that I have piles. So I have a pile of this. These are all my flips, and these are all my extra papers. And you can do them in any order you want. I tend to like to throw them. I do one blank paper, I do one flip, and then I grab one paper. Let's just throw the music in here. So now I've got 2 flips in a row. So I've got a flip here and a flip here. So for this next one, I'm going to go again with a blank page. And remember, your papers don't all have to be 8.5 by 11. See how this one is shorter? That's fine. It actually adds a lot more interest if they're not all the same size. So I've got a flip there, but I am going to go ahead and put another flip this way. And then I need another piece of paper. So I think I'm going to we'll go with the tracing paper. Remember, don't spend too much time making decisions. Give yourself 30 seconds to make a decision and you should be done. All right, another flip, another piece here. And then I'm going to put, let's do this page next. And then last but not least, for this last part, I'm going to do the flip. And then I'm going to do this piece because I don't like to have these in the center of my journal. And then last but not least, I'm going to put that in the middle. So what you'll see when you open up your journal, a couple of blank pages and then a piece of different paper, some flips, a piece of tracing paper. All of these different things are going to make it more interesting for you. But if you want to just use plain paper or plain lined paper, that is completely fine as well. So now we want to make sure that everything is in here and right side up. The next thing we're going to do is sew in the signature. Now, you can do a couple of different things depending on how many pieces of paper you have. You could certainly staple this. If your sewing machine will go through all this paper, you could sew it down the middle with your sewing machine. There's a variety of different things. If you don't want to do any of those things, you certainly could just take a piece of string or a piece of ribbon and tie it around it. So you would just simply tie it through the middle here and up the back and just tie it around it without ever having to sew anything. That also will work. So what I'm going to do, I have a bucket where I keep all of my binding materials. So I'll show you some of the things that I have in here. I use a phone book, and I'll show you in a minute how I use that phone book just to do things with. I have a variety of different things in here, but what I want to show you is 2 of the different threads that I use. So this is upholstery thread. You could use waxed linen thread. This is crochet thread. This is for crocheting. This actually, I love this. This was actually my grandmother's. She was making a tablecloth, and I inherited both the tablecloth and this, so I will be sad when this is all gone. This is butcher's twine, so you could use that. You can get that. I literally bought this at the grocery store. So you can use twine. I do recommend that you use upholstery thread over regular thread. It's much stronger. Let's see, you could use jute twine. So you have a lot of options. Sorry, my throat's getting dry. But one of the things you definitely want, I have big binder clips, but I'm only doing one of these. So for my journals, I actually prefer just big old paper clips like this. And what I learned this after I started making journals, but paper clipping everything together makes sure that everything, when you punch your holes, lines up. So this is your last chance to make sure that your papers are right side up or the direction you want them. And actually I want that direction. Oh, and now that gives me 2 flips in a row too. Well, I'm just going to real quickly rearrange a couple of things in here. This won't take a minute. We'll throw that one there. Nope, we're not going to throw that one there because that's got to flip on the other side. Let's do this. We're going to throw that there. And then Ah, there we go. We got that. We got that. So now oh, you know what? Okay. I may have to start over again. Sorry about that. Let's do this. The nice thing about these flip pages is you literally can flip them over. And it looks like what I don't have is another flip on this side. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put that flip there, that flip there, this one here, and then we're going to put this one here. So remember, there's not a perfect order. You can kind of figure out what order you want to do everything in. So now there's 2 flips there. I'm going to flip this over, and now I need to double check this because this is now upside down. That did not work well. All right, so that's what I'm saying is you want to always double check before you totally sew everything together that you actually have everything facing the direction you want. So one last time, let's look through this real quick. And we have our tracing paper, we have our music, and for me this is right side up because I have the title over here. Honestly, it really doesn't matter. It's a personal preference, so much is. And then here's my July Edith Holden book page, and I want that down a little bit further. I like it a little bit more centered. You also could totally line everything up straight across the bottom. That looks super cute as well. But for this one, I'm just going to put a lot of this in the middle or towards the bottom. So now I've got that one right side up, and that is everything. So one last time, I'm going to push everything down. Now, one of the things I want to show you is that paper, because we're expanding here, can you see that that actually pushes the paper out? So this paper is further out than this paper. You want to try to get that as tight as you can, because when you sew it, then it will be much tighter. So I just take my paper clips, I clip both sides first, and then I go back and clip my other 2 sides as well. But now I'm making sure I'm pressing with my thumb right in the middle here to make sure everything is lined up. Now that it's all lined up, I'm going to show you how to do a 5-hole punch. 3-hole punches are really easy to do. My favorite is the 5-hole punch, and that's mostly because I just like how they look. And you don't need a guide even for a 5-hole punch. And then I did buy, this is actually a tool for, I got a whole set of picks. You could use an ice pick. There's anything that will poke through the paper. I call this my pokey tool. You do want to pre-drill your holes. You want to make sure your holes are done before. So all I've done is opened up a phone book. So any thick book would work that you're not going to use or try to save. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to poke a hole in about the middle. And then I'm going to poke a hole towards the top. And then I'm going to poke a hole at the bottom. So that would be your 3-hole punch. And then you can either poke your hole smack in the middle. I kind of like the look better of having that 5th one, or these extra ones, kind of closer to the top and the bottom. That's just a personal preference. And so now I'm going to stick it in here and make sure that I've come all the way through. So see how that's now coming all the way through? Some of my holes are bigger than others, and I just want to make sure that everything is poked all the way through. There we go. So you could, if you don't have a phone book, you literally could hold your paper and poke straight through. You don't have to do it on a phone book. That was a trick I learned from Nick the Booksmith. Excuse me. Now I'm going to grab my thread. I'm going to use upholstery thread for this one. I highly recommend, highly highly recommend that you also get a needle. Oh, huh. I don't see my needles in here. All right, let's see. I probably have one in the bottom. I usually keep my needles in a needle thing that I made. Well, for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to use my grandmother's needle. So I'm going to pull this all off because I don't need this anymore. Oop, I do need to cut that, however. So I'm going to cut that off, and we're simply going to measure out our thread. So to measure your thread, I'm not sure where I learned this trick, but this is to measure your thread. You measure the length once, you measure the length again, and then you measure about halfway, and that is the amount of thread you need to do a 5-hole punch. And I think that amount will work also for a 3-hole punch. But see how this has a much wider eye? That works great for all kinds of different size threads, and it just makes it really easy. You do not want to knot your thread. So if you're a quilter or someone who sews, do not put a knot at the end of your thread. Now, I like to have my knot on the inside. Sometimes I put my knot on the outside. So today I'm going to put my knot on the outside because I am going to go back and cover the edge with lace. So you start for a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. You come through from one side, and you want to leave a little bit of a tail, but not a long one. And then you're going to go in through the second from the top one. You're going to come back through the very top one. So now we've gone through those. We're going to go back out through this one, and then we're going to come all the way down to the bottom past this thread to your bottom thread. And then go back out through this one, and then go back in through this one, and then last but not least, you're going to pull your thread out through here. And I think I need a little bit more length, so I'm going to pull this a little bit further. There we go. So you can adjust your thread length if you need it. And then last but not least, we're coming out. Now you'll see this thread is on this side. You want your needle to come out on the other side because we're going to make sure that everything is good and tight. So now I always go back and double check. Is this tight? Because we don't want any loose threads, otherwise your journal will fall apart. Then you're going to tie a basic square knot. I don't know if you all were ever in Girl Scouts or any kind of thing where you had to tie knots, but a square knot is right over left and then left over right. So you're taking the same piece of thread both times and going over. So it forms that. I always like to do one more just to make sure. All right, so there we have ours, and you can trim that off. Now we have our journal put together, and if you would like to decorate it, this is where you would go ahead and decorate it. This is where you can add glue lace on the spine. You can add more layers on the cover. This is your time to go ahead and decorate the outside if you want to. I don't recommend you do a lot of decorating before you glue the lace on if you are doing the lace after you've sewn your signature. If you are not going to do the lace, and you can see this doesn't look horrible, but I don't want to see those holes, so I am going to glue some lace on the spine. But again, you can add layers, you can do all kinds of things this way. And that is your time to do that. So that is your basic journal. And so I hope that this makes sense. If you have questions, of course, send me a message. And I hope that, as I always say at the end of every video, I hope I've inspired you to be creative today.